Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the 9th episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie. And today I am so excited to dive into a topic that I get endless questions about, and that is kidney stones and supplements. Should I take a supplement to help with kidney stones? What kind of supplement should I take? Are supplements safe to take? Etc., etc. I get lots and lots of questions. So hopefully in this episode, I will be able to answer many of your questions and help guide you in the right direction. So I think I wanted to kind of break up this podcast into two big sections. The first one is, should I take a supplement to help with kidney stones? And this is talking about all of those endless supplements out there that claim to dissolve kidney stones. I can't even begin to name them. There's like kidney stone breakers, kidney stone crushers. Like there's so many names, and they all have ridiculous names like that. Supplements out there. And basically, all of them are a super, super large dose of citrate, pretty much. That seems to be a pretty common theme. They're a really big dose of potassium citrate or magnesium citrate or calcium citrate or some combination of all of these things. And so we've talked about citrate previously on the podcast, and I have tons of information about it on my site. But citrate generally is a good thing for kidney stone prevention. Citrate binds with calcium, which makes that calcium unable to bind to phosphate or oxalate and form a kidney stone. So citrate is a really powerful inhibitor of kidney stones. And when we don't have enough citrate in our urine, that definitely can make kidney stones more likely. However, we've got two big sort of caveats with this statement. So the first thing is, if citrate would be good for you, is your urine citrate low in the first place? If it's not low, then why in the world are we supplementing citrate? That's probably not going to do a ton to prevent stones for you. Likely your stones are being formed for some other reason, maybe low urine volume, probably high urine calcium, possibly high urine oxalate, or endless other things. So that's question one, is if citrate is really going to be beneficial for you. And then the second thing is that citrate is a very potent source of alkali, or the opposite of acid. And so when you take citrate, your urine pH will go up. Absolutely. That's just how it works. Citrate will inevitably cause your urine pH to go up. And that's actually a really good thing for many people. If you have too much acid in your urine, or your urine pH is too low, then that is great. That citrate's going to help prevent stones if you have low urine citrate, and that raise in urine pH is a good thing, because we know that low urine pH or too much acid in your urine does make definitely uric acid stones more likely, and likely calcium oxalate stones more likely as well. But this is a delicate balance, as many things in kidney stone world is or are, right? So the kicker is that if your urine pH is too high, so above, this is a big range, so this is not definitely a hard cutoff, but if your urine pH is getting to be above 6.5, 6.4, then we start to worry a little bit about calcium phosphate stones. And so if you are taking these large doses of citrate and your urine pH is already high, the citrate is just going to send that pH up even higher, which could be very harmful for some people. If you have low urine citrate and high urine pH, this is a situation that many people are in. It may or may not be right for you to take citrate. We've got to look at all sorts of different things in your urine. But the key point, I'm kind of going on and on about this, but as I tend to do. But the key point that I want to make with all of these supplements that are basically just really, really high doses of citrate is that it may or may not be good for you. And in some cases, in many cases, it actually could be harmful. And so my biggest issue, I have lots of issues, but I think my biggest issue with all of these supplements is that they claim to be this like all-encompassing kidney stone health like supplement, or they claim that this is the thing gonna dissolve your stones or gonna, help stones. And that's not the case. All kidney stones are different. And so for anyone to make any claim that XYZ is good for every single person with kidney stones is just plain irresponsible. So that's my big warning. I wanted to start with that, is that these things may not be appropriate for you. It's really important to ask your doctor or your dietitian what is best for you. There was actually a really great study published by a doctor named Kevin Koo, Dr. Koo. I've actually met before at conferences. This paper was studied in June of 2020 in the Journal of Endourology. And it was really interesting because they looked at all of these supplements that we're talking about, right? Like these kidney stone crushers, kidney stone breakers, and these types of things. So they actually went to both Amazon and Google, and they looked at all of these supplements that were available to take without a prescription. And any supplement that claimed to treat, alleviate, or prevent kidney stones was analyzed basically in this study. So they ended up finding they found 27 supplements on both Amazon and Google that they analyzed in this study. And there were 56 different ingredients in these 27 supplements. And so then they look to see okay, are any of these ingredients good for kidney stones, right? So is there any data to support their use for treating kidney stones in any sort of way? And they found that 87% of the ingredients that were in these supplements that they found on Amazon and Google had literally no data to back them up one way or the other. 84% of those ingredients had no data, which is pretty astonishing. Of the 16% that did have data to back them up, there was there was 18 studies that were in this, that they found that supported these ingredients. And of those 18, only 12 actually hinted that maybe there would be any benefit. And only 5 of those studies were actually done in humans. The rest were done in either animals or even just cell studies, like culture studies, which is pretty dismal, guys. So in order for me or any doctor or anyone, ideally, to be recommending any supplement, we need to know, does it do what it's going to do? We need to know, are there any side effects? Does it actually hurt you in any sort of way, right? That's why it is so important to have research to back up whatever we're doing, whether it's taking supplements or making dietary changes or taking medication, right? It's so important to have this data. And as this study found in 2020, there's just simply not the data to back up basically any of these supplements that you find online. And I thought it was interesting, Dr. Koo at the end mentioned that a lot of these supplements recommended taking it 3 times a day with maybe 12 ounces of water a piece. So that's a lot of water. And so he deduced that perhaps the benefits that they even found in those 5 human studies were just because they were drinking a lot more water, right? That's about almost half of the water that we recommend that kidney stone formers drink just from what they're supposed to be taking with a supplement. So it might have not even been the supplement itself that was showing that benefit. So the point is there's very, very limited data out there on a lot of these supplements. Many of them are just very large doses of citrate, which may be beneficial for you, but it's very, very specific to your situation, to your 24-hour urine test. And we really need to know what's going on with that urine pH to make sure that we're not sending it unnecessarily high. That's a big risk. So again, really, really important. The other risk of these supplements that I feel like sometimes isn't talked about, because obviously we know about side effects and those things are bad and we need to look out for them. But the other thing is cost, right? So that study that I mentioned in 2020 found that, unsurprisingly, there was a huge range in the cost of these supplements, but they found that the monthly cost ranged somewhere between $4 to $189 a month. That's a lot of money, guys. That's a lot of money. And especially if that's not doing you any good, that money would probably be much better spent in other ways, right? Whether it be for fruits and vegetables, or, buying higher quality groceries, whatever it is, right? There's that cost cannot be understated as well, because we all know that money is tight these days, right? So So those are my thoughts on kind of these big kidney stone breakers. The one that does come up very often is people ask me about Chancropiedra. There's a few very, very small studies in humans that looked at this, but nowhere near the quality of evidence that I could recommend that people take it. So I do not recommend Chancropiedra. I just wanted to specifically call that one out because that question comes up quite a bit. So, all right, that was sort of section 1 of the podcast about these sort of generic like supplements that are good for kidney stones. The next section I wanted to talk about was some supplements that I think could actually be bad for kidney stones, because there are a fair number of them that you could take that could be making things worse. And some of them are pretty common, so I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that these supplements generally should be avoided for people with stones. So the first one is vitamin C, and this is vitamin C supplements. I do not care about vitamin C from your food. You realistically are not going to get copious amounts of vitamin C from your food, and it's actually very easy to get enough vitamin C from your food. So a lot of people say, oh, I have to take this vitamin C to prevent colds. One, the data that it does that is very, very limited, so it's probably not going to do a lot anyway, and it is very, very easy to get enough vitamin C from actual fruits and vegetables if you are eating your fruits and vegetables, which we should be doing anyway, right? So the first supplement that I wanted to caution everyone about was vitamin C. And the reason that this is maybe not the best for stones is that your liver can actually make oxalate from a variety of things. And one of those things that it can make oxalate from is vitamin C or ascorbic acid. And so when we're taking vitamin C supplements, especially in large doses, that can definitely make your liver make tons more oxalate, and that oxalate eventually gets excreted in your urine, and that's how it can form kidney stones. I've definitely seen this come up because honestly, vitamin C supplements are everywhere. So, obviously if you're taking like a multivitamin that has a large dose of vitamin C, or if you're taking maybe cough drops have vitamin C. Maybe your orange juice has vitamin C in it. Maybe, I feel like there's just like little bits of vitamin C in everything these days. And so all of the supplemental vitamin C can add up. So I would be careful with these vitamin C supplements, especially if you have high urine oxalate or you form calcium oxalate stones at all. The next supplement that I wanted to mention is either turmeric or curcumin supplements. The reason for this is that turmeric does have a fair amount of oxalate in it. And if you're using turmeric as a spice in cooking, I have no issues with it. Like the amount of oxalate that you're likely going to get from the tablespoon or teaspoon of turmeric that you use an entire pot of curry or whatever it is not going to be that much. That's not concerning, especially if you're eating it in a balanced diet with enough calcium. But in supplement form, it does make me nervous that that's a very concentrated high dose of that turmeric, and so it could potentially have a ton of oxalate in it. Again, this is true for turmeric and curcumin. So those just make me nervous, those turmeric or curcumin supplements, especially again for people who have high urine oxalate or who have calcium oxalate stones. So I would be very cautious about those supplements as well. Along the same lines, cinnamon supplements. Cinnamon itself is pretty high in oxalate, and cinnamon in food, do not care about one bit. The amount of cinnamon or amount of oxalate you're going to get from cinnamon on your oatmeal or on your applesauce or in a cookie, not concerning. But a cinnamon supplement that is a huge dose of cinnamon all at once could be concerning. So I would be cautious with that. The other sort of supplement that could be giving you a very high dose of oxalate is any sort of like superfood green powder. There's tons of these out there as well. Like, it's like powdered vegetables, like vegetables in a pill, powdered, like oftentimes there's superfood or like green powders, anything along those lines. Again, this is just a very, very high dose of potentially very, very high oxalate vegetables. I feel like spinach tends to be in there quite a bit. And like if you're eating a little bit of spinach, probably not a big deal. But if they are, drying that spinach and creating a powder out of it, you could be getting a very large dose of that spinach. And honestly, not getting a lot of the other benefits of eating those vegetables anyway. And so those make me a little bit nervous as well, again, for people with high urine oxalate who have calcium oxalate stones. So again, turmeric, cinnamon, and these green superfood food, green powder supplements are all sort of potentially very high doses of oxalate that make me a little bit anxious when I'm working with people. I have just 2 more supplements that we should be looking out for. The second to last one is vitamin D. So a reasonable dose of vitamin D doesn't scare me at all. A lot of us, especially those of us living in the north, are deficient in vitamin D, and vitamin D is important for so many different body processes. And so I think a supplementation of 1,000 to 2,000 IUs of vitamin D per day is probably very reasonable, assuming that you need it. I am not a fan of just everyone taking a vitamin C supplement, infinitely just because. We certainly should be checking to see if we're low in vitamin D and then supplementing as appropriate. And if that is determined that you're low, taking a reasonable amount of vitamin D is totally fine. But the problem comes when we are taking very high doses of vitamin D. I'm talking like 50,000 IUs of vitamin D a week, especially when we take that for a very long period of time. Sometimes that 50,000 IUs of vitamin D is prescribed when people are very low in vitamin D. And so maybe, that's recommended. But I feel like the problem is a lot of times we don't follow up on that, right? So we take that 50,000 IUs per week, and then we never follow up. We never, get our labs checked again. And so we just sit on that dose for a really long time. That does make me nervous. One of the roles of vitamin D is it aids with calcium absorption in our intestine, which is a wonderful thing. But when we're taking these really high doses for a long period of time, there is data to show that may be associated with kidney stones. And the reason being that it could sort of help, like our guts could sort of overabsorb calcium. So, and just kind of messes with that calcium metabolism and balance. So very, very high doses of vitamin D. Again, that 1,000, 2,000 IUs a day, don't worry about it. But if you're taking a very large dose, I would say just make sure that you need that very high dose and that you follow up like maybe 6 months after you start that high dose with your doctor to make sure that you need to continue it. And then the last supplement that I wanted to caution everyone about is actually calcium. And I know this may be very confusing because I've talked already on the short life of this podcast about how important dietary calcium is for stone prevention. That is very true. Calcium that occurs naturally in foods is highly associated with a lower risk of kidney stones. We know that's really, really important because that dietary calcium can inhibit oxalate absorption in our gut. But calcium supplements for the vast majority of people with kidney stones can get us into trouble because calcium supplements, for whatever reason, tend to raise urine calcium levels a lot more than naturally occurring calcium. And calcium supplements are associated with a higher risk of kidney stones when we look at large studies. So calcium supplements, supplemental calcium of any sort, for the vast majority of people with kidney stones, I would say avoid. It is very, very preferable that we get that calcium from actual food, from actual dairy, or plant-based milk substitutes if you don't tolerate dairy or avoid dairy for whatever reason. So, there are a couple populations or couple groups of people who calcium supplements may be appropriate for. People who are forming kidney stones because of gastric bypass surgery or other weight loss surgery, that calcium may be appropriate for. That's kind of the biggest one that comes to mind. Potentially people who have primary hyperlaxuria type 1 or 2. That's a very rare genetic condition that basically causes a very large amount of oxalate in your body. That may be appropriate. But these are very specific situations. For most of us that are forming calcium stones, we really don't want that supplemental calcium because most of us are forming kidney stones because we have high urine calcium. And so we really don't want to introduce this extra source of higher urine calcium with that calcium supplement. We really want to be getting that calcium to reduce oxalate absorption from food whenever we can. But this is not a steadfast rule. There are definitely situations and people who would benefit from calcium supplements, but it's just not the majority of us. I wanted to wrap up this podcast episode with just a couple supplements that actually do have a little bit of promising evidence out there. But these definitely are not something that I recommend for everyone. Again, all people are different. All kidney stones are different. The reason we're forming kidney stones is different. So it's really important to know what's going on in your 24-hour urine test before we go down this route. The first supplement that I think is really interesting is magnesium. So we know that magnesium definitely plays a role in calcium oxalate kidney stone prevention. Magnesium in your urine can actually bind with oxalate in your urine, which means that oxalate can't bind with calcium and form a kidney stone. So we see that people who form oxalate stones do tend to have lower magnesium in their blood and urine. But the problem is when we've looked at trials to see like, okay, well, what if we supplement everyone with magnesium? Does that reduce the risk of stones? And we found that it doesn't really do that. But there honestly haven't been that many trials that looked at that, and the trials that have sort of just blanket gave everyone with calcium oxalate stones magnesium, or some not even just calcium oxalate stones necessarily. So I do think that if you are forming oxalate stones and you have low magnesium levels, I would say that probably makes sense to supplement magnesium if you can, and you're unable to get that from foods. Always food first whenever possible, but sometimes these supplements can help us meet our needs. So magnesium, I think there could be a role for that for some people, but definitely not something that I would say everyone should be taking. One sort of be careful notice for magnesium is that high doses of magnesium can actually cause diarrhea. That's actually, they give you a very high dose of magnesium before you get a colonoscopy. Actually, that's what they give you to clean out your system. So that's not great, right? We don't want to be having diarrhea because that's not very good for our bodies generally, but it also is going to get rid of a lot of fluid. So from a kidney stone standpoint, that's not great either. So if you do choose to take magnesium supplements and it is causing any sort of diarrhea, I would probably stop or reduce your dose because that's going to be kind of counterproductive if you're losing all that fluid through your loose stool. There is a little bit of data for both fish oil and probiotic supplements that both of these things could possibly lower urine oxalate levels. And I think that I feel more comfortable recommending both probiotics and fish oil because they are so widely used and there's basically no harm, right? That we know that these things are very safe and there's very, very little, if any, side effects to these things. And so I think in certain people who have very stubborn high urine oxalate, potentially a fish oil or probiotic supplement could be a good thing. But this is a very small number of people, right? The vast majority of people are able to get urine oxalate levels down simply by getting in enough calcium and by reducing those very, very high oxalate foods. So most people don't need this, but there are certain times when I might recommend that fish oil or probiotic. The last supplement that's kind of interesting is vitamin B6. So this is only for people who have primary hyperoxaluria type 1. That specific genetic condition, people are forming kidney stones because the liver can't process oxalate appropriately, basically. And so the liver is sort of overproducing oxalate. And vitamin B6 is necessary to help that pathway work a little bit better. So whereas trials with B6 and sort of the general population of people who have oxalate stones hasn't really been super promising, there's definitely data to show that people who have pH1, who take very large doses of vitamin B6, can have lower urine oxalate levels because of it. So vitamin B6, if you are out there listening and have pH1, that is something that I would definitely recommend. But other than that, not something that I'd recommend for most people. So I thought, wanted to finish on maybe a good note. There is definitely some data out there. And of course, I am always following the research. I'm always reading the data to keep all of us updated because there is so much interesting research going on in kidney stones right now. I feel like we know so little when it comes to kidney stones. Honestly, we are just barely scraping the surface of what we could know about kidney stones and what we could know about prevention. Personally, I think the area of the gut microbiome and probiotics is especially fascinating. I actually did my thesis on probiotics way back when. And so I've always had a special interest in the gut microbiome. Plus, I just think it's fascinating, right? To think about the literally trillions of bacteria in there. Don't quote me on this, but I can't remember how many more times, but there's, like 5 times more gut bacteria in your intestines than there are cells in your entire body. Like, that is mind blowing, right? Like, of course, all those little guys are doing all sorts of things for our health. And we are starting to learn all of the things that they do to help with kidney stones as well, both good or bad, right? Depending on the situation. So So again, lots of interesting stuff out there. And as I learn, I certainly do my best to update my blog and podcast and update my course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School, with all of the most up-to-date information. So definitely hang out with me if this is at all interesting to you. So with that, I will close the 9th episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. Thank you so much for listening in today, and happy eating. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.